Hi, movie summary here. In the opening scene, a young black man named Andre is walking alone at night through a manicured suburban street. A little sports car pulls up and starts slowly tracking him. Andre gets spooked and changes directions to briskly walk back the way he came. When he turns to see what the car did, he sees it's parked where it was, but the door is open. From out of nowhere, a man in a medieval helmet attacks Andre, renders him unconscious, and drags his body to the car. Rose arrives at her photographer boyfriend Chris' apartment with pastries and coffee. They are getting ready to go away for the weekend to visit her family, and he's concerned because they don't know she's dating a black guy. She assures him that, while her parents will likely say some stupid things, they are incredibly progressive. She even adds that her dad would have voted for Obama a third time if it was possible. On the ride to her parents' home, Chris goes for a cigarette, but Rose takes it and throws it out the window, warning that her parents would hate that she dates a smoker. Chris calls his buddy, Rod, a TSA agent at the local airport, and reminds him to take care of his dog and not to feed him people food. Rod, disapproving of Chris dating a white woman, berates him and says visiting the white folk is a bad idea. He also flirts a bit with Rose, and Rose thinks it's sweet when Chris gets a bit jealous. While they are deep in conversation and not entirely paying attention to the road, a deer darts out in front of the car and they hit it. They pull over to investigate and call the police, who ask what they are doing in the area. Rose tells them that they are visiting her family. The officer asks to see Chris's ID, but Rose steps in and says that because he wasn't driving there's no need for that. The officer lets them go, and Chris tells Rose that it was hot the way she stood up for him to the racist policeman. Chris and Rose arrive at her parents' home. Her father, Dean Armitage, is a friendly neurosurgeon who tells Chris that he would have voted for Obama a third time if he could have. Her mother, Missy, is a strangely cold hypnotherapist. The Armitage also have two on-site black helpers, Walter the groundskeeper, and Georgina, the maid. Dean acknowledges that it looks bad, two wealthy white people having two helpers who are black. There's definitely something off about both Walter and Georgina. They have a sort weird politeness about them. Dean gives Chris a tour of the house and shows him old family photos. Dean claims that his father was a track runner who was beat out by Jesse Owens to compete in the 1936 Olympics in front of Hitler. There are also photos of Rose's brother who will be joining them later. The family gets together for afternoon tea. Missy stirs her tea and lightly taps her spoon against the teacup 3 times. Missy asks about Chris' parents and he tells her that his father left when he was young and his mother died after being hit by a car when he was 11. Georgina feels a bit jaded while pouring tea, and Missy tells her to go lie down and get some rest. The Armitage tell Rose that they are having their big party tomorrow. She's surprised and they remind her that it's the same day every year. Rose's brother Jeremy arrives and he proves to be an aggressive spoiled rich kid. That night at dinner a drunk Jeremy starts talking to Chris about MMA fighting, saying that Chris would be a natural at it because he is black. He wants to spar, but Chris says that he has rules about play fighting with drunks. Dean and Missy tell Jeremy that maybe it's time for him to go to bed. Chris and Rose retire to their room where she apologizes for her family and they go to sleep. In the middle of the night, Chris gets up and decides to sneak out for a cigarette. While outside he sees something in the distance charging at him. It's Walter. He heads straight for Chris, but makes a sharp turn at the last moment. While inside the house, Georgina is staring out a window. And turns out she's looking at her own reflection, not Chris. She adjusts her hair and Chris decides to head back inside. Before Chris can make it back to his room, Missy startles him by turning on a light. She tells him smoking is a bad habit and offers again to help him quit. He sits reluctantly and jokingly mocks the idea of hypnotism, unaware that she is already slowly hypnotizing him, using her teaspoon as a focus object. She takes him back to the night his mom died when he was 11. He begins to narrate what happened that day, telling her that his mother didn't come home from work and he was too scared to do anything, so he just sat watching TV and nervously digging his nails into his bedposts. Chris tells Rose that he thinks her mom hypnotized him last night. He has vague recollections of the evening, so he finds it difficult to place exactly what happened. The Armitage's wealthy friends arrive for the big party. It's mostly older white people who say many inappropriate things to Chris. They begin asking him weird questions. After a while Chris sneaks off and finds a blind man named Jim Hudson, who says that all the people at the party are ignorant. He's an art dealer and Chris is well aware of who he is. Chris says that he's a fan of Jim's work. He envies Chris's eye. Jim says that he himself tried photography but was never very good at it. When Chris goes back to mingling with the guests, he discovers another black guy. He's about Chris' age and Chris tries to bond with him, but he too is stiff and unnatural like Walter and Georgina, but something about him seems familiar to Chris. Chris decides to check in with Rod again, and he finds his phone unplugged again. He plugs it in, calls Rod, and tells him everything that's been going on. Rod jokingly warns him that white people love to have sex slaves and he needs to get out of there. Rose finds Chris and he tells her how weird everything is and that his phone was unplugged again. She tells him he's just being paranoid because he's in an uncomfortable situation. He agrees and she leaves. Rod tells Chris to take a picture of the black guy and he will see if he remembers him. As Chris is about to leave, he's blocked by Georgina, who apologizes for unplugging his cellular phone. She lifted it up while dusting the nightstand, and when it came unplugged she didn't want to mess with it further. He says that it's fine and that he didn't mean to rat her out. She doesn't understand, so he clarifies that he didn't mean to get her in trouble. She gets super weird and lets out a single tear while telling him that the Armitage treat her like family. Chris goes back outside and tries to discreetly take the familiar black man's picture with his cell phone but has forgotten to turn off the flash. As soon as his phone flashes, the man changes. He goes from overly prim and proper to raving, and he jumps at Chris telling him, "Get out, get the fuck out while you still can." Rose is freaked out now too. She asks her dad what happened and he explains that the flash just caused the man to have a seizure. The man comes out and apologizes for upsetting everyone and says he must return home. Chris and Rose go for a walk and Chris tells her that he's sure he recognized the guy and that something strange is definitely going on. She agrees by saying that it did not seem like a seizure at all. Chris says that he'd really like to go home now. Rose reluctantly agrees. She says she will make up something to tell her parents. Back at the house, Dean is holding a silent auction with his guests. Next to him is a picture of Chris. Jim Hudson wins the auction. The other guests all go home. Chris goes to pack his belongings and gets a call from Rod, who tells him that the guy in the picture is a guy they knew named Dre, who used to work at a movie theater but went missing some weeks ago. The phone battery dies. Chris notices that the closet door is open. He looks inside and finds a box filled with photos of Rose posed romantically with many other black guys. There are also photos of her with both Walter and Georgina, who don't at all resemble the robotic versions Chris has met. Rose returns and Chris says that he needs the keys to put their bags in the car. She looks for them in her purse as they make their way out of the house. Suddenly, Jeremy appears, blocking the front door. Dean and Missy are there too. Jeremy is ready to attack, but Missy and Dean tell him to calm down. Chris keeps telling Rose to get the keys. Missy and Dean tell Chris that they don't want him to leave. Chris asks for the keys again and Rose says, very calmly, "You know I can't give you the keys." Chris finally realizes that Rose too is in on whatever this is. Jeremy attacks Chris. Dean yells and Missy clinks the teaspoon on her glass, causing Chris to sink back into the dark void again. Meanwhile, Rod keeps trying to call Chris, but it keeps going straight to voicemail. He looks up the picture of the guy in the photo and sees that he went missing some time ago, so he goes to the police. He tells a female officer that his boy was kidnapped by white folk to be a sex slave just like the missing guy in the picture. She calls in 2 more officers to listen to Rod's story. When he finishes, they all burst out laughing. Nobody will take him seriously. Chris wakes up to find himself strapped to a chair in front of a mounted deer head and an old TV set. He watches a video made by Dean's father that talks about immortality. Teacup and spoon appear on the screen again, and he's out. Rod tries Chris's phone again and Rose answers. She lies by saying that Chris left 2 days ago and she's concerned about his whereabouts too. Rod tells her that he went to the police and she seems concerned. He starts to realize that something is wrong, so he tries to record the call, but when he starts talking to her again, she tells him she knows he has the hots for her. He tells her she's a crazy bitch and hangs up. Chris wakes up and Jim Hudson is on the screen. He tells Chris that they are going to swap brains. What he really wants is to be able to see the world through Chris's eyes. Ting 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 of the teaspoon and Chris is out again. Dean and Jeremy prep Jim Hudson for a brain transplant. Dean tells Jeremy to go get Chris, so Jeremy goes down the hall and he finds Chris unconscious. He takes off his restraints and gets an IV ready. Chris wasn't unconscious after all. He'd stuffed padding from the chair in his ears to block the sound of the teaspoon. He knocks out Jeremy. Dean calls for Jeremy and goes out of the lab area to look for him. Chris rushes him and impales him with the deer antlers from the other room. He knocks over a candle that ignites the blanket covering Jim Hudson too. Rose has earbuds in and isn't aware any of this is going on. While she listens to music, she is googling images of handsome-looking black men with good physiques. Chris goes upstairs and finds Missy. She goes for the teacup and spoon, but Chris beats her to them and smashes the cup. Instead she attacks him with a knife, but he turns it on her and stabs her to death. Chris goes for the front door again, but Jeremy has returned and puts him in a chokehold. Twice Chris struggles to pull open the front door, but Jeremy kicks it shut. On the 3rd try, as Jeremy kicks the door, Chris stabs him in the leg and breaks his skull with brutal head stomps. He runs outside and gets into Jeremy's car. On the passenger seat is the medieval helmet from earlier. He starts down the driveway, but hits Georgina. He can't just let her lie there like he did his mom, so he gets her in the car and continues down the driveway. She wakes up and attacks him. They crash into a tree and she dies. Rose hears this through her earbuds. Suddenly, the rear view mirror is blown away. Rose is coming after Chris with a rifle. Rose shoots again and misses Chris. From out of nowhere, Walter runs past Rose in pursuit of Chris. As he tackles Chris, they wrestle on the ground, and Chris takes his picture. Walter turns and asks Rose for her rifle. She gives it to him, and he shoots her in the stomach, before turning the rifle on himself. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to comment and subscribe.